If you want to fully factorize an expression, like the one represented on the screen here, there are a couple of principles that you need to understand before we can start. The first one is, if I can take a value for x and substitute it into the expression and get a zero answer, then that means that that value is going to help me to find my first factor. So let's take a look at that principle now. This is quite an easy example, and I know that if I make x is equal to 1 and I substitute that into my expression, I'm going to get 1 cubed minus 2 times 1 squared minus 5 times 1 plus 6. And you can see that that is going to be 7 minus 7, and the answer is 0. As I've got a 0 answer, that number that I substituted for x has now helped me to find my first factor. My first factor is in fact going to be x minus 1. Now I need to find my second factor. If my first factor had been a linear factor, as shown here, x minus 1, my second factor must be a quadratic factor. Now it's quite easy to find your first term because the first term of the linear factor times the first term of the quadratic factor must give me the coefficient of the first term of my original expression. That means that if I've got x, I must times that by x squared so that I get x cubed. Likewise, if I'm working with the last term of my linear factor times by the last term of my quadratic factor must give me the answer of the last term of my original expression. Now I had minus 1, and if I times minus 1 by minus 6, I'm going to get plus 6. Clearly the problem is with the middle term. There are two ways that I could find the middle term, and I'm going to show you trying to find the x term of the original expression. The answer of the x term of the original expression had a coefficient of minus 5, so that is what I'm going to be looking for. There are two terms that I can use to get x terms from the two new bracket factors that I've just created. If I take x and I times it by minus 6, I'm going to get an x term. And if I take minus 1 and I times it by a middle missing term of my quadratic factor, I'm going to get an x term. So I know that there's something over here, plus y times by x, and these two coefficients must give me an answer of minus 5. If I now just extract the numbers, x times minus 6 is going to be minus 6, and minus 1 times y is going to be minus y, and those two numbers must give me an answer of minus 5. To find out that missing y, all I need to do now is to solve for y in this simple equation on the right-hand side. So minus y is going to be minus 5 plus 6, which is 1, and so y is going to be equal to minus 1. In other words, the quadratic factor that I have just created is going to be the factor of x squared minus 1 times x minus 6. So what I've done so far is I have broken my original expression up into two good factors. But the second factor is not yet fully factorized because it's still a quadratic factor, and I can, using the trinomial method, factorize that further so that it becomes two linear factors of x minus 3 and x plus 2. Using this method, I have now been able to factorize a quadratic expression.